We're live.
We are live, Reverend Tiffany and Dr. Hudson.
Hello, everybody.
How y'all doing?
Doing well, doing well.
How's everybody doing out in the social media world?
Good evening, everyone.
Yes, good evening to all.
Come on in the room.
Come on in the room.
Yes,
I'm in the room.
We had a good topic tonight, right, Rev?
Yeah. Okay.
interesting.
We have a special guest tonight. Look at that.
Look at that.
We all
Pass it
blessed.
out. Pass it out.
We all blessed with the doctors in the house.
Oh gosh.
The doctor is in the house.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, do I get to know you for the call?
Yep. You sure do. What just happened?
Welcome, everybody. Come on in.
Let me turn this phone off because that's going to be not good.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're going to give everyone a few minutes. And as you're coming in, we ask that you would please share, get someone to come on in and join you and bring your family around. This is an important topic we're talking about today, silencing your inner critic.
Ooh. I think we all can relate to that.
Yes.
Everybody.
To thy own self be true.
We have a special guest, Dr. Reggie Hudson is in the room with us today.
Woo, woo, woo. One of our hardest
Welcome.
Welcome, sir.
It's good to be here. Thank you. It's good to see everybody.
Say that again.
Good to see everybody. It seems like I haven't seen y'all in person in almost 2
years.
I know. It's been crazy, right?
Yeah, it has been.
And we are joined by the illustrious, gorgeous Reverend Pastor, first assistant to the pastor, Pastor Prescott's in the room.
Yes, she is. Live and in person, right?
Welcome. Hi, Patricia. Welcome.
My honor. It's always fun to hang out with you guys.
Welcome. So again, as you're coming in, we ask that you would just share on all of your platforms. We're on YouTube. We're on Facebook. Twitter. Go ahead and share this page if you can with someone on your page. The more you share, the more we can spread the word and get some very, very important information out as we're doing our SoundMind panel tonight. So don't be stingy, okay?
Right. Share with the peoples.
Shares with the peoples.
Right? I love the name, SoundMind.
We do this every second Thursday of the month, right? Yeah, every second Thursday at 7 p.m.
Beautiful.
So y'all be on the lookout for us.
Good evening. Hi, Mom Joan.
Mom Joan is on here. Hi, Mommy.
Hi, Mommy.
Hey, Mommy. I'm such a mama's girl.
All right.
I'm going to share it too, Rev.
Yeah, I'm going to share. Welcome, everyone, this evening. All right, so you guys want to just jump in there? Let's start.
Let's do it.
Chatting. All right.
Let's do it.
So tonight we're talking about silencing your inner critic. And the first thing I think is important for us to just start digging into is that the fact that our inner critic needs to be silenced is because it's so loud, right? And usually
we can go home right now.
It's a wrap.
That was the benediction. It's so loud.
It's so loud, right? There is a critical side that we all have that for some reason is aggressive and assertive, and usually is much more vocal than our confidence, than our ability to speak positively. There's just this part of our brain that tends to lean toward the negative. So tonight we gotta really, dispel all of those things that we do internally, all the voices that we hear that keep us stuck in being super duper critical. It is super critical people who usually are very critical of others, right? So we're very critical of self, but we're also very critical of other people.
That's right.
And I have found that some of the most critical people are some of the most sensitive.
That's so true.
Ooh,
That
Very true.
point out the flaws of other people, but lack self-awareness, right? And are not very clear about their own inner voices and when to shut them up, right?
Right.
So I want to hear from, and you guys, please don't forget while we're kind of digging into this subject to leave your comments and your questions. So as we're talking tonight, don't forget to leave comments and questions. We can see your comments and we will post your questions so that we can get some of your answers tonight as well as we're talking. So let's talk about it, right? So let's talk about it. What is it inside of us? Pastor Hudson, let's start with you. All right. Give us the spiritual part to this. What is the reason that so many of us have such a loud inner critic? Where did that originate from?
We just finished last night a 3-night word revival, and we were dealing with the topic of rededication, reclaiming, and renewal. And when you think about that inner critic, I immediately go back to 1 Timothy 1:7, where God says, "For God has not given us the spirit of fear, but He's given us the spirit of power, love, and here it comes, a sound mind." And the first challenge, I think, is that we hear the word of God, but we don't believe what God says about us. Then Proverbs 3:26 says, "For the Lord shall be your confidence and will keep your foot from being caught." So we've become so accustomed and so comfortable with the negative that it's almost like even when God tells us the positive, we're assuming something has to go wrong. This is too good to be true. And then we fall into these problems.
And I think, Reverend Tiffany, I think we are naturally negative, just human beings across the board. I think we're naturally negative, and we have to be intentional about being positive. So as Dr. Hudson just said, even when we have a negative dialogue in our heads, we can see everything that God in the Bible is saying to counteract that, where we will still say, but we still lean towards the negative. So I say this all the time. We have to think about what we're thinking about. We have to say, is what I'm thinking? Because sometimes I think being critical of yourself, I think there's a such thing as healthy criticism. Like preachers,
Absolutely.
right? When you preach a sermon, I think it's as hard as it is. I think it's healthy to re-listen to it, to critique yourself. That's hard to do. I get it, but I think that's healthy. And then there's negative criticism, self-criticism, because we just think, I could never do it. I know what God said. We always have a but. We need to get rid of the but. When God calls us to do something, He's not looking for perfection. And as you said earlier, when we're critical of ourselves, we're critical of others. We look for perfection in ourselves and perfection in others. And it's never going to happen. Name one time you preached a perfect sermon. Never.
No.
Never, ever.
The perfect sermon I preached was the one I didn't preach. I didn't have to mess it up. Didn't have a chance to mess it up.
Exactly.
But Pastor Val and Reverend Tiff, I think also what Pastor Val said too is, I think a lot of times when we're breaking the mold, because I think pretty much when we talk about Black and brown people in our communities, our heritage, our legacy, we inherit so many things from our families. And it's not that it's intentional. Sometimes they think they're protecting us. So like, I remember, I was small, I would tell my parents, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And I'm going to, and they would say, yeah, okay. And things of that nature, or be realistic, or whatever the case may be. And then as you get older and you grow and you get around your own circle and you start to break the mold and become successful, success travels lonely where fear has a lot of friends, It seems like sometimes you're almost made to feel guilty for doing something positive, for feeling good about yourself. So then you sometimes look for ways to tear yourself down to fit into that other group that likes to live in that community.
Yep. And I think you said earlier, I think when we come from in our childhood, if we have a parent or somebody of influence that told us, you can't be and you can't do, we become full grown and still think, but mama said I can't. And that dialogue plays over in our head until we start believing it. And I think it takes a pivotal moment in our life and in our spiritual walk to say, okay, my mama may have said that, but that's not what God is saying. If that's all that has been preached to you, that's been your family commentary forever. It's a struggle to stop thinking, to unthink it.
You're bringing up a good point too about how a lot of us, that critical side of us developed early in life, right? That it didn't just come overnight. It's something that is deeply ingrained in us from things that we've heard from parents, things we've heard based on our friendship, our circle, and people that we've kind of associated ourselves with, and then what we said to ourselves based on what we've experienced, right? Like just an example of what you're saying, Reverend Val. My son, right, today, we were learning social studies assignment, and we got into a conversation about what he wanted to be when he grows up, right? And he says, I want to be Spider-Man. And I was like, Spider-Man? You always talk about superheroes, right? And he says, no, I do. I want to be an actor. That's what he said. I want to be an actor. And he says, I'm going to be a Black Spider-Man.
Wow.
And I was like, really?
Look
He's
at that.
like, I want to be an actor and I'm going to be Black Spider-Man. Well, who am I? Right? To just automatically take that and then throw in seeds of doubt when he's at that point in developmentally where he believes he can do anything.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yep.
That's faith. That's the faith that a child has that God talks about, right? Is this belief that they can do anything. And that belief that belief that children have that they can do anything is often silenced by those of us who didn't accomplish what we wanted to accomplish.
Yep.
And then what we do is we project our inabilities and our inadequacies and our shortcomings and our failures onto our children. And that's not fair, right? So what did I tell him? You better get working out. You know, Spider-Man's got muscles. They got six packs. No more donuts. No more.
There you go.
He's like, I can't have donuts. I was like, nope. You have to start cutting out the sugar and
well, not all the sugar.
Not all the sugar. He needs some carbs for energy, right?
So you're trying to put something else in here. I know where you're going. But Reverend Tiffany, you said something, and I thought back to a young man when I was pastoring my first church about 30 years ago. I started when I was really young. And he was like 7 years old, and I did a sermon one time about faith, and I put him up on the altar. And I told him, I said, close your eyes. And I said, and I backed up. I said, now when I count to 3, I just want you to just jump. And it's the middle of the sermon. I counted 1, 2, 3. He closed his eyes. He jumped. I caught him. He didn't question anything. The reason I'm saying that today, that young man, his name is Philip Gomez. He's Dr. Philip Gomez. Wow. Not only does he have a tremendous practice, he's married. He lives on the West Coast with 2 children, but he has started this powerful fatherhood initiative. I believe somewhere in that jump is where it started. You talked about, the faith. Your son says, I want to be, Spider-Man. And of course, immediately we contextualize it to what?
Yeah.
But he's deeper than that. So now it's how you cultivate it. He's not bothered by inner conflict. He's motivated by inner determination.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. All right. So Reverend Prescott, did you have any more comments about that?
No, I was just going to say that, a lot of times our critical inner voice doesn't even match our reality. Like you said, with your son and the example you just gave, there's there's nothing in reality that says they can't be what they're saying they want to be.
Right.
But we just kind of get stuck in our heads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That we can't do something, right? That life is going to tell you that you can't do it. And we project that onto other people. Even like take your coworkers or your family members or your spouses when they say, I have an idea, let me run it by you. And our minds automatically go to, are you sure? Do you have the finances for that? Yeah, exactly. What made you want to do that? And we give these looks and this perception as if like we're already sowing doubt into someone, right?
Right.
And and it automatically makes the other person second guess themselves, and then their inner critic gets louder.
Right.
That, like, wait a minute, maybe you're right.
Maybe I can't. Right.
Maybe I can do it.
Because if you're already feeling insecure about something you know you can do, or something that God asked you to do, or whatever the case may be, if you're already feeling insecure, the last thing you need is somebody else adding more insecurity to your insecurity. And that is why I think it's wisdom oftentimes to just keep things to yourself. Until God tells you it's okay to open your mouth. Because I'm already scared doing this myself. I already feel inadequate. I'm already in my head about it. I need nothing but happy voices.
Or somebody that's going to tell you the truth, but from a place of love, right?
Exactly.
That's from a place of love. Adam and Eve, perfect example of that, right? When Eve was getting tempted, that was not the time for Adam to fall silent, right?
Right.
Because her inner critic was speaking louder, right? Not to go all deep and spiritual, but that was her inner critic. Like, well, did God say? Or wait, am I? Can I do it? Am I really like God, like I think I am? And something came and sowed a seed of doubt. And then her spouse, her partner, right, is, instead of telling her, don't do it, and speaking something positive, he joined her in her dysfunction, right? And so now we have two dysfunctional people now with no way out, and needs an outside agent to come in and save them. Perfect example of like how your inner critic could get you in trouble and make you doubt what God already said about you.
Exactly. Oh, that's so true. You're so right, Reverend Tiffany. I think too, maybe I'm giving a little transparency here. The inner critic challenges you more the older you get, because you tend to sometimes get to that point in life where you want to play it safe. And just what you said, I think about, when God moves you to do something that's unorthodox, that's different. I never forget that before I wrote my first book, I was running around. I was a youth director for many years. And then when I went into ministry pastoring, I'm looking for particular books for youth. I'm going to bookstores. I'm this and that. And I had something specific in mind and I couldn't find it. And finally, one day, I just felt the Lord's voice say, well, why don't you write it? But, come on now. Me, how come I'm a former epileptic, had a stuttering component, other things. How in the world am I going to, so you start to doubt yourself. So I say older because now I'm finding this tenacity starting to come back that I had when I was pastoring, earlier. But at the same time now I find myself stopping and doing all these caution checks. I'm not saying being careless, but instead of saying, okay, Lord, I'm going to trust you in this. I'm not going to listen to the voices, because I'll tell you what, Christians can talk you out of stuff better than the world can.
Of course. Of course.
So that inner critic, and basically it comes too off your failures. If you fail, then all of a sudden you're like, all right, maybe I'll just slow it down.
Right. And when you see a child, like Reverend Tiffany, you were saying earlier about your son, when you see a child fail at something, they don't be like, oh my God, I'm not going to do it again, because what if I fall again? If I jump that high, they get right back up and do it again. There's just so much we can learn from children that have that childlike faith.
And you can see when they start to change, when that starts to change, when you ever hear, sometimes I'll hear children say things like, oh, never mind. We're like, wait, what were you going to say? And they're like, never mind. And it's because something in them is already telling them, if I share this, it's going to be put down, or it wasn't important, or no, it's okay. And when I start to see kids reach that age where that self-doubt comes in, I automatically try to dispel that, because that's a negative seed that's been planted, right? Our inner critic, that voice is self-destructive. I saw Talisa, she said, my inner critic is a hater, right? It's always like,
I love that. Hater.
Because that's what it feels like, right? Every time you're trying to progress, they have something, your inner critic has something negative to say to pull you in a different direction, right?
Right. Because it's not normally based in reality. Almost never is it based in reality.
In psychology, we call it catastrophizing, right? Like it's like what those what if statements that you always say to
Oh, that's
yourself
good. That's
that
good.
has you thinking about things in the future that hasn't happened yet, but
Right.
it stops you and paralyzes you today, right?
Mhm.
As if it's happening and it's not happening, right? So that catastrophizing is a dangerous, what we call thinking trap, because it
Yeah.
automatically stops you in your tracks and keeps you from progressing. And that's something we don't want, right?
Wow.
Because
Right.
it'll automatically stop us, stop our progress. And that's the trick of the enemy, right? To get you stuck. And we talked about it last time is, feeling stagnant, and how is that going to get us to what God wants us to be if we let that negative voice dominate every
Right.
area of our lives?
That's true. And I think sometimes we're looking for a formula to get unstuck, but sometimes you just got to jump.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
sometimes
Well, you
that's
just
not
helped me there.
okay, do A, B, C, D. Sometimes you just got to jump.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Me, when I find myself all in my head, I have to literally, for me, I have to start talking out loud to myself.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And that works for me. That normally, once I hear myself say stuff, that normally pulls me out of it. You
Mm-hmm.
know.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yep.
Conquering
So go
conquering
ahead.
your fears too. I mean, I think that's a key point. Um, Many times we can run from instead of conquer. I
Mm-hmm.
think about Moses. He ran from his problem.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Now he could have lived a successful life in what he was doing, but
Mm-hmm.
there will always been a question mark
Mm-hmm.
about what he ran from. But look
Mm-hmm.
what God did. God conquered his inner conflict that said, you're going back to where you had your problem.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference is I'm going to go with you.
Right.
Right.
And so, I think that's the important thing. I think you've said it before. You can't be afraid to go ahead and start over. I think inner conflict sometimes is not negative, just negative, but it's also compromised. For
Mm-hmm.
instance, we're in the month of October. There are people already who are starting to think about next year.
Mm-hmm.
You almost have 2 to 3 more months left in this year, but
Mm-hmm.
because certain things have not lined up the way they wanted them to, they've dismissed it. And then at December 31st, they'll say 2022 is going to be my year. Here's the problem. 2019, we said that.
20. Wait, go
Hey,
back to 2010. We've been saying
2020 is
it.
going to be my year. Look what happened.
Nothing changes if nothing changes.
Yeah, you see what I'm saying? So, I mean, it's one of those things where, and that's why it's good. That's why you have to be around people that are like-minded, that understand, the greatest challenge is not failure, it's really success. That's when we get the big head.
Mm-hmm.
But, that knows it takes that. But you can still pick each other up. But if you get around mindsets, whether it's church, whether it's work, whether it's family, whether it's community, and they got that crab syndrome, they just want to stay, they want to get 2 loaves of bread but don't want to own the bread company, then you have a problem.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you're saying the company we keep is very important.
It's important. It's definitely important because we unfortunately people when they don't see the big picture, they don't want you to see it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I saw Patricia. Wait, who was this? Kelly Smith had a question. She said, "Do you think a study on children would be a great starting point to confronting our inner critic?" And I say, absolutely. It's not the
Mm-hmm.
only way we can start, but it definitely is. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and the reason why I say it's not the only place you can start is because sometimes things happen to people later, like trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Where
Mm-hmm.
some things start to like grief. Like grief is a perfect example of
Oh
how
my goodness.
someone starts to really question a lot about their identity and about God and about their place in the world and their, is it my turn next? It gives
Yeah.
people a lot of inner fears that start coming up during grieving processes or any kind of traumatic event. But childhood is also a good place, especially because children are so open, right? They're
Right.
open to receiving new messages, and that means they're also open to receiving negative messages.
Yep. Yep.
So, it's important at that age that we are able to interpret for them because children don't always have the language to describe what they're feeling.
Right.
So we have to be able as adults to read for them what they can't read in themselves, right? And
Mm-hmm.
interpret
Mm-hmm.
some
Yeah,
things for
that's
them.
true.
I would say kids don't have coping skills. They have to learn coping skills.
Yeah.
That's not always it's not always taught. So it has to be. It has to be something that they learn. Go ahead, Reverend Prescott.
I was going to say, look how many of us ourselves or even have known people who have had teachers in high school that said, well, no, what do you want to be? Well, no, I don't think you should do that. I think you should. And people actually graduate high school, move on in life, not doing what they want to do because a teacher, to me, that's a tragedy. A teacher tells you you can't, no, well, that's not for you. So it starts from childhood and your family life to school. And then, I think sometimes when we become full-grown adult, we think, well, I should be further along. But if we don't conquer that inner critic, it can impede our progress.
That's so true in terms of Reverend Tiffany, you were talking about your son. I'm thinking about that again. My grandson Reese, he'll be 7 this month. And of course, young kids, they got the technology down to a science. So he's running around with his iPad, he's running around with his phone, but he's in this stage now where he wants to interview everybody and he wants to do the news, that sort of thing there. So it's one of those things. I'm like, wow, he's already now. I don't know if he's going to do that down the road, but he's already getting comfortable expressing himself in those areas. And I realize that sometimes we got to be careful not to live. We should always live for our children, but not live through our children. And so, I'm grateful that, his parents encourage him. They give him the flexibility to do that. And like you said, I think we were talking about coping skills. You have to be able to help them learn what that looks like.
Yeah. Vicky has a comment. Let me see if I can pull this apart. We often tell our general dream picture of what we want to be or do to others, only to have them speak negative to our life dreams. And she talks about the story of Joseph, right? Holding on to the dream later brings forth the specific dream of what was prophesied early, only now to have others to say how they envisioned the dream spoke of in the beginning. Maybe it'd be better to not speak to others until the dream can be seen and natural, what you believed in supernatural, right? And I think also part of that is because we don't always know what the dream is. So how are you going to communicate it when you still are unclear on what the picture is that God showed us? And sometimes we move too quickly and we go ahead of God, sharing things without the full picture and not always having a clear understanding on what it is that God is trying to show us, right? So let God do his work in you first. I think some of us are not willing to let God work on our character and develop us before we go out trying to say, oh, I'm gonna be a national preacher. Like,
and you just got saved yesterday.
And then we went and we're wondering why people have a big question mark.
Like, wait a minute, grow up first.
Right? The way you lie, like you still gotta work on your lying, and
it's hard being a local preacher. Forget being national.
Right.
But
sometimes we move a little too fast.
I agree.
That I think helps when you said like about Joseph and the dream. Sometimes, like you said, you can say too much too soon. And our church family knows. I love this scripture in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 11. In the King James it says, and that ye should study to be quiet, and to do your own business, and to work with your own hands as we have commanded you. So it goes to that very thing. Sometimes you have to let things develop and play out. And that's that whole, a call is different than commission. Paul says that God got your attention, but there's a process.
Right.
Before you're actually ready to do it.
You just cussed. You said process. That's a cuss word in the church. Cussing on social media, process.
And we don't always know what God is doing. It really is a process. We don't always know.
We say we do, but we don't.
We don't.
and sometimes you can't even understand it. So how can you possibly explain it
to someone else? Right.
Yeah.
I have a testimony. This, like, I may have shared this before. I'm not sure, but when I was in high school, this goes along with what we're talking about. When I was in high school, and I graduated. I went to college for business. I was a business major when I started off. And I was failing. I was not doing well. I hate math. Don't ask me why I went into business. I took accounting 1 and I was like, screw this. I'm failing. And my professor gave us a test back and said, anybody below this average needs to withdraw because this is test 1. And he folded, when they fold your test up and hand it to you, you did.
You be opening it, like take you 5 minutes to open it.
Oh man, listen, everybody did was like half my class got up and walked out, and I stayed there till that class was over. I was like, I'm not embarrassing myself. I'll wait until after the class is over. Listen, I immediately went to my student advisor and I told him, I'm failing. I was in tears. Like, I don't know. I'm not going to make it through college as a business major. So he said, hold on a second. Just calm down. Black guy, right? Nice guy, Rutgers University. He said, relax. I got you, And he pulls up my transcript and he says, why? Tell me why you're taking the psychology electives. And I said, I like the psychology. Me, dumb, right? Not even thinking, right? I like the psychology classes. They're interesting. And he's like, well, why are you interested in them? I was like, I don't know. He just was like, Tiffany, you took like 8 psychology classes.
Wow.
And I was like, he's like, and you aced them. And he says, have you ever thought about being a counselor? And I said, what am I going to do with as a counselor? He's like, you can own a private practice. How do you feel about working with people? And I was like, oh my God.
Wow.
And it was like a light bulb went off.
Look at that.
Wow.
He said, hold on a second, pulled out a sheet of paper. He says, you've taken this prerequisite, this prerequisite, this prerequisite. If you keep going, you'll graduate a year earlier.
Wow. And that's exactly what you did, right? Wow.
And something clicked in me where God just started showing me, remember I did this for you? That was all preparing you as a counselor. Being in the prison ministry, talking to the kids in the juvenile detention center, which I've been doing since I was 12 years old. Never in a million years that I think that was preparing me to be a counselor.
Wow.
It's like right in front of me. Right. It's something that sometimes we're so caught in day-to-day life. And I had fears. I had my own inner critic that was like, when you graduate, this is stuff you hear from other people, right? When you go to school, you're supposed to do business, take business classes, work for corporate America. And I would have completely missed what God was trying to do, listening to other people.
Wow.
It's amazing how somebody sees in you what you don't see in yourself.
That's normally what it takes.
Yeah.
And I believe that God will absolutely put people in your life to show you something about you that you haven't accepted or that you don't see yet. So it's like he'll send, just like there's people that will water down your whatever it is you want to do. I think he also has people that will push you forward.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
You have to be discerning enough to know who's who.
I'll give you an example of that, and I'll use the Harvest Fellowship as an example, and of course Bishop, top of the list on that. We've been a part of many different associations, local associations, state associations, national, and I pulled out of every last one of them, some of them twice, because it was just really a cash cow. The cow was screaming, it was squeezing it so tight. And when I was invited, into Harvest, I came, but you come with this pre-baggage from the previous. And I just never forget the first night. Matter of fact, I don't know, Pastor Val, I was going back about 10 years ago now. I came to that dinner and I shook Bishop's hand and I felt the Lord make a connection there. And that night, I think I was bugging Pastor Val, where do I sign up? Where do I sign up? Because this was different. I was in the room with people and I didn't see pretense. Not one person, and this is even 10 years later, asked, well, how big is your church? Things of that nature. So, when you're around the right setting of people with the right values and the right goals, and doesn't mean we don't fail, doesn't mean we don't have shortcomings, but my goodness, I mean, Lord say so. I never want to go back to some of them other associations and affiliations because the gathering doesn't only help to conquer my inner conflict, but it pulls out the inner ability.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think potential and self-criticism run parallel.
Yes.
God is always trying to reveal more and more of what we can do that we haven't done. And at the same time, your inner critic is saying, no, you can't. No, you can't.
Yeah.
No, you can't.
Yeah. And trying to build a case, right?
Right. For why you can't.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's funny you said that. So we'll listen to the case being built for why we can't, but we very seldom listen to the case being built for why we can. That takes intentionality.
Now, this is going to sound totally crazy, but those who know me, they know it's as true as the hair is off of my head. I'm telling you. I've been saying this for years. I want to be the first preacher to preach a sermon in outer space. You know, people they like, hey, oh, that's nice. That's all of a sudden now this last year, I'm like, is that really outrageous? Because now they're sending regular folk up. They sent Star Trek up yesterday.
Yeah.
Now, granted, I know it takes a whole lot of things lining up, but all of a sudden now, it's like, okay, the question is, am I willing to do what it might take to make it a possibility?
Right.
And then, of course, need God's favor to intervene in that. But sometimes we give up. Like I think, Reverend Chip, you said before, something will come to our mind. We'll say, you're too young for this. I'll admit this. You might not remember when the pet rock became a big thing. You're too young for that, Pastor Val.
I don't know what you're talking about.
The pet rock. Yeah, okay. The pet rock was a big thing. It was a big thing, the pet rock. And all it was just having a rock, and you just kept it wherever you would go. My brother had this. He had a favorite rock. He put it on his dashboard, and everybody was always teasing him about that rock. About 3 or 4 years later, some guy comes out with the pet rock, and people, it was a novelty for a moment. They were buying it. Now, suppose my brother or we had the mindset to take something so simple.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? So, sometimes we say, that's ridiculous, or somebody say, oh, that's crazy. You don't know if it's going to be the next big thing.
Yeah. Right. That's true.
Yeah. All right. Robin had a question. I'm going to go back up a little bit. She said, dealing with bipolar has not, I'm not sure how to read that. The question, dealing with bipolar not has now, praise God. Some days my mood changes and someone pushes a button. I see myself getting really in a not good mood. What's the best way to handle this differently? I think, Pastor Hudson, you had kind of touched on that, right? About who you surround yourselves with. And, I think sometimes we feed off of other people's energy. And when we're not confident in our own ability to kind of create boundaries with people, then they do have an open door or access to us that they shouldn't have. I don't think anyone should be able to come in and just control your mood by what they're doing.
Right.
That's an indicator that we don't have good boundaries.
Yeah.
And also that we're not doing a very good job with our own self-actualization and awareness of what sets us off and how to control and manage that.
Right.
That's a lot of self-work that has to be done there. When people, like, you ever hear people get in a fight and they say, well, she shouldn't have said nothing to me.
Right.
Had she not gotten in my face, I wouldn't have clocked her,
And let me tell you something. Women fighting is worse than men fighting. I want you But Robin, I just want to encourage you on that. First of all, I'm so grateful that now we're starting to understand mental health and not make this crazy stigma. Because if we're really honest, we all are affected to some degree.
Yeah,
all of us.
Some sort of a mental health situation. And the bottom line is, don't make your condition a label of hindrance.
Right.
It's just like somebody else having a condition of something else. Sometimes we tend to pick and choose on certain things to harp on more than others.
Right.
Just understand, you said it afterwards, praise God, which means you're in Christ, which means that first scripture I shared, he is giving you a sound mind. Okay.
Right.
doesn't mean a sound mind can't be challenged. It
Right.
just means you got to work through some things, and and has been shared by Pastor Val and Reverend Tiffany. You got to make sure that you're in a healthy social circle and know when to break from the unhealthy social circle.
And I think Reverend Tiffany said boundaries. I love that. How would you explain or advise people or show people or tell people how to create boundaries? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think it's different for everybody, right? So what a boundary might look like. Like perfect example, I have 2 young children now, and because I'm a therapist, sometimes people call me and reach out to me at odd times of the day and in the middle of the night, and I have to have a boundary, right? I'm still a mom. I have other positions that I play in my own life, and so I can't be all things to all people at all times, right? And so a boundary is something I have to set for myself, that I have set. After this time, I'm not answering anybody's email. Right. It's a personal boundary.
Right.
At a certain time, I shut it off and I become wife.
Right.
Even I have boundaries with my children. 10 o'clock, get in the bed. Can we read a book? Nope, you should have did it earlier. I told you to clean your toys up. Like, it's mommy daddy time. Goodbye.
Right.
And say your prayers, brush your teeth, and go to bed. Right. Because boundaries, because there's time that I need to do other things. I'm still a wife. I still have to have self-care. I still have a prayer life, and I still have a word life where I have to study. And all of us need to know like what it is for us that we need to do to create some kind of balance in our relationship, so that we're not pulled into a negative space.
Right.
And recognizing what that is for you, right? So if someone's raising their voice at you, or crossing physical boundaries, and you may need to remove yourself from the environment. You need to maybe compartmentalize that relationship and not share certain things with people, that when you share certain things with them, it takes it to a whole different level. Sometimes we need to, just work on breaking ties from certain people.
Sometimes it takes that.
Unfortunately, sometimes it does, gotta be careful with this one, but there are some people who are, for lack of a better word, leeches, right? Or where they, every time they're in your presence, you feel depleted, where that when they come around, they suck everything out of
the life out of you,
like mosquitoes, right? Just like you leave it, they leave you're left itchy and depleted. And some of those people, you got to compartmentalize them. Like, nope, not today, and can I come see you? Oh, I can't. I'm sorry. Make yourself unavailable, right? That's boundaries. And a lot of us find ourselves in negative headspaces a lot. And that negative inner critic or outer critic starts to speak so loud because we haven't shut some doors and created boundaries. And that's important to do.
Right. And I don't think people have to understand your boundaries.
Yeah.
Because they're yours. Go ahead, Dr.
I remember my pastor who birthed me into the ministry, Dr. Cousin, many years ago when I first started pastoring. He said, "Now, Reg, understand, don't make yourself too available." Now I'm just starting pastoring, so all the excitement and energy, and I'm like, come on, the pastor crazy. Lost his mind. And I really bought into this thing for 14 years.
Wow.
That for 14 years I bought into it, that people said, well, pastors are 24/7. Until I found myself at 35 in the emergency room with a nitroglycerin tablet under my tongue.
Wow.
You see what I'm saying? So and thank God it wasn't a heart attack. It turned out to be stress. And that was just about the time when they started to talk about stress being the silent killer. But I didn't understand that. But I understand that now, because somebody a couple weeks ago said, well, you pastor, you're 24/7. And I had to really hold myself on that one. But you're right. It's one of those different things now, because I used to feel guilty.
Yeah. Yep.
This was my inner conflict. I would feel guilty that I got this call, that I'm supposed to do this. I could be dead, whatever. There was times I came back early off vacation when I did take one. For the longest time, I didn't take one. Now, if I can, you can't stop me.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah.
That's good.
All right. So we're running a little low on time. So let's give some ways that we can really silence our inner critic. Okay. So we're going to go over a few points, and then go ahead and ask your last few questions. And Keisha, I'm great. I see your comment. I see that you have a better understanding now. So she said she had to look it up, right? That it's the voice in your head. It's the voice in your head telling you what you've done wrong. But it is not just that, right? It tells you maybe what you've done wrong. It tries to create some kind of sense of identity in you, and sometimes that's a negative thing. Sometimes that inner critic that we develop comes from outside of us, right? From things that we've learned or things that we've experienced or heard. And so we have to first develop an awareness of what those thoughts are.
Yes.
And where they originate from. So the first thing is not being in denial about what that inner voice is saying to you and where it originated from. So an example is I did have a young lady who was having a conversation with me, and her family was very adamant that she should not return to a previous relationship. And the way she approached it was, stop telling me what he did or what this, stop doing that. Because if you tell me, then my mind will go back to that and I won't be able to move forward. And I said, let me ask you something. So bad things happen. But like you said, Reverend Prescott, there's a part of us that the criticism is good, right? So you're going to ignore all of the red flags so that you won't have to think about it.
Wow.
And her thing was, it's too hard to think about it because my mind will keep going there.
Wow.
Well, then that means you're not addressing it. So avoidance is not solving it.
Right.
And so a lot of us are not aware because we just keep avoiding our inner critic.
Yep.
That's good.
Because it's painful, and sometimes it's a painful reminder of past experiences. And that's not a way to address it. So my thing is, but what if, so one thing I said to her, well, what if you keep ignoring it? What would happen? And give me examples of what would happen if some of those behaviors came back. How would you recognize it if you would completely ignore all of the things that have happened before? So she said, this is what I don't want. I don't want to have to go there. You need to go there, right? So one of the things that we have to do is develop an awareness of our thoughts. Don't be in denial about what those negative thoughts are. Is it fear? Is the inner critic based on selfishness or lies that have been told to us or betrayal or trauma? Like, we have to work through that. Anybody want to add to that?
No, I agree with that. I think that when we don't confront, when we avoid, I think we kind of, in our minds, think it's going to go away, and it always comes back up. It doesn't go anywhere. It goes into hiding.
Yes.
But it's still there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I agree 100%. I can see why you went into psychology, Reverend Tiffany.
She's good.
The way you took
You're
the words
natural.
and everything. Yeah. I can see why you did that. But you're right. You think about our inner critic. Have you ever heard your own voice on tape?
Oh yeah, it's the worst.
Yeah. And isn't it amazing? We can hear other people's voices, and I'm guilty of this. I don't go back and look at any tapings or anything. I just don't do it because I don't like my voice. But the bottom line is this: we tend to criticize ourselves more in simple areas. I don't like my voice. But God gave you that voice. You know what I'm saying? So you're right on that in terms of being aware, self-awareness, and that's hard. That really, because that really takes not trying to compare yourself to somebody else, and that's oof.
And you got to tell yourself the truth. The truth is looking like, I saw a post on social media the other day. The worst person you can lie to is the one in the mirror. And ain't that the truth?
Which we do all the time.
Yep.
Wow, that's something.
So yeah, I agree with that.
Another thing that we want to ask ourselves is, what's the evidence that what I'm thinking about myself is true, right? Because a lot of things that we're thinking is, like you said, Pastor Hudson, it's an exaggeration of something that we're thinking. We automatically think, oh my God, I'm the worst person. If I hear another person say to me, I just suck as a human being, I'm like, huh? that's a terrible thing to say about yourself. I'm a terrible person. I can't do anything right. And I'm like, who I think is a terrible person? Jeffrey Dahmer. That's who I think is a terrible person. I think he's a terrible person.
You went all the way back.
Jeffrey Dahmer's a terrible person. Right? The Unabomber's a terrible person. Right? The Unabomber's a terrible person. You're not a terrible person because you made a mistake.
Right.
Which we all make. But we take negative things that have happened to us, and oh my gosh, we will like internalize it to the point where we are nothing.
Yeah.
We'll make ourselves this small based on a few mistakes. A few things that have happened to us have become the sum total of our lives.
We need to cancel the cancel culture.
We will make somebody this small over one mistake that they've made. Like we've never made a mistake.
That's so true.
So critical of other people and ourselves, and don't give ourselves or other people grace. So we got to really like take a step back and look into ourselves and make some changes. Another thing is replacing negative thoughts with something more positive, right? Reverend Prescott, you talk about that all the time, and we call it thought stopping. You know what I mean? Like so Reverend Prescott said, think a different thought, right?
Right.
And that's what we need to
what?
Thought stopping.
Literally
tell yourself stop.
Right.
Like when you're looking at yourself in the mirror, be like, stop.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
You're overthinking it. Just stop.
You're being a drama queen.
Right. We got to tell ourselves that. Tell yourself in the mirror. Think something else.
Right.
Take a more positive thought. Well, how can you say that differently? Something that I tell my clients is like, what would you tell a friend in this situation?
There you go. And that's the thing. We know how to exercise compassion on other people. We very rarely exercise compassion on ourselves.
Exactly. And I think knowing how to be vulnerable. Sometimes we say be vulnerable, but knowing how to be vulnerable, because, that can be a double-edged sword.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Learning how to be vulnerable is important, and doing it in the right context. Because sometimes we use the wrong platforms to be vulnerable.
Right.
We're vulnerable to the wrong people.
Yep.
And we open up ourselves to people that are manipulative or trying to get us, in a bad situation, or they just can't help us. We're vulnerable and open to people that just don't have the tools to give us what we need, right?
Right.
Like sharing someone about your past trauma, and I'm not saying don't share, but there are some people that just don't know what to do, and we get offended. Like I told them, and they just was like, oh, okay, sorry. And we get offended. Like, that's all they said. They didn't seem to care, but it may be that they just don't have the equipment in their arsenal to help you.
Yeah.
And you just hit on something there too. I share with our leaders quite a bit. Because you have a title in front of you, your name doesn't mean you have to answer every question.
Absolutely.
But at least know where to find the answer. And so that was a very good point you brought up there. And and people will get funny if sometimes if you don't, you're like, okay, well, let me get back to you. Let me just pray with you or pray on it, whatever.
Yeah.
And because we have that inner critic. We'll be like, see, don't nobody care. This is why I don't say anything to anybody, right?
I ain't talking to nobody.
And I ain't talking to nobody no more, right? Every time I share what is going on, people look at me like I'm crazy. It may not be that, right? It could just be that they just don't know what to do, or what to say. And word of wisdom for the people on the receiving end of someone sharing is just show compassion.
That's it.
Even if you don't know what to say, it's simply just being an empath or being compassionate goes a long way. You can say, I'm so sorry that's been your experience. I wish I knew how to help.
There you go.
I don't have the tools, but what can I do in this moment to support you?
Right.
What can I do? Do I need to make a phone call for you? Do you just want me to sit with you? Sometimes just leaning over, if it's a good friend, and holding their hand and saying, I'm just so sorry to hear that. Goes a long way without having to try to find answers like, well, did you pray about it? Did you pray? Did you talk to God? Because ain't nothing God can't solve, right? Ain't nothing. Just take it to the altar.
Tiffany is fucking me up. But that's true.
Right? Did you pray? because girl, we can pray right now. Sometimes that's fine,
right.
But sometimes
people need more work.
Yeah,
they need more work.
I'm a firm believer. Anything you do 21 days in a row, good or bad, becomes a habit. So just like David had to encourage himself, it's good to get in front of that mirror at least once a day for 21 days and just take God's word and encourage yourself.
Right.
And remind yourself, we like to say we're fearfully and wonderfully made, but really, say that and remind yourself, I might not have crossed every T and dotted every I, but God made me for purpose, and I'm getting better. It takes work to do that, but still, that's a way to help to address those inner feelings.
Amen.
Say something positive about yourself.
All right, you guys, we're wrapping up. Does anyone have any last comments or things they want to add as we're closing out? Any words of encouragement?
No, I thought
Pastor P or Pastor Hudson, any last comments?
I just wanted to, first of all, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Highly respect both of you. You're making a tremendous difference in the kingdom, and certainly want to encourage everyone to understand you were not here by accident. You're here on purpose. I don't care if you came into a family with one parent or two. God wanted you here, and He put you here to have a destiny. I'm gonna curse again. You have to go through that process,
right?
give God that destiny, and understand. Turn that inner voice into something that's going to be productive. And make a difference in somebody else's life too.
That's right.
And like the sister said earlier, your inner critic is a hater. No, seriously, we absolutely have to be intentional about, silencing our inner critic, because it's never going to go away.
Yeah.
It's just human nature. But we have to be intentional about thinking another thought.
Amen to that. All right, everyone. Well, we thank you so much for joining us today. Pastor P, Pastor Hudson, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We pray that everyone enjoyed the discussion today. Don't forget, we do have pathway counseling that's available as well. And so anyone that needs to have a conversation outside of this setting, please make sure that you reach out to one of the intake workers at Pathway Counseling. You can call 856, I guess we can put it in there, 856-782-6748. If you need to just speak to one of the counselors. And I believe Pastor Nick and Bishop are also still doing conferences and appointments. So always reach out to Bishop and Pastor Nick as well for appointments if you need additional help. And we will see you guys again on the second Thursday.
Thursday of every month, 7 p.m.
At 7 p.m. for another conversation. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night, and we'll see you again.
Have a good night.